Good morning and welcome to Bridge Overview, Process and Policy. Here today with us is Dr. Kathy Olesen-Tracey, our Senior Director of Adult Education and Literacy, Jane Black, our Associate Director for Program Compliance from Adult Education and Literacy, both at ICCB, and Bevan Gibson and Sarah Goldammer. Bevan is our director here at the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center, and I'm Sarah Goldammer joining you today to talk about the Bridge overview. Bevan and I will share with you some information, general information about Bridge, and Bevan's also going to share with you the differences between Bridge and ICAPS IETs. And then we'll turn it over to Kathy and Jane to talk about some policy from ICCB. And the goal today is to help everybody to be very clear on what the components of Bridge are, what a Bridge course and a Bridge class looks like, and also to help you think about what do you already have in place. How can you modify that, tweak that, enhance it to make it into a Bridge course? And of course, we'll also talk about the benefits of Bridge and ICAPS IETs. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This session will be recorded and will be available. One of the handouts that's available for you here to download, if you wish, is the PowerPoint slides. If you're not able to download that, please let me know, which leads me to another piece of information. We will make sure that we have available for you our contact information should you have questions or want to follow up. And then also, everybody is in a mute-only situation today, but if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat or the question box, and we will also provide opportunity that we can unmute people if they want to ask their question. So let's go ahead and get started. Oops. I'll turn it over to Bevan.
Good morning, this is Bevan. We wanted to hold this Bridge training because of the fact that we've had some discrepancies throughout the field, wondering about bridges and ICAPS. They are not the same, and we're going to first start with looking at the statewide Bridge program definition, which is actually in the ICCB actually came up with this definition years ago. Basically, Bridge programs prepare adults, okay? They prepare them to enter and succeed in credit-bearing post-secondary education and training that leads to a path of employment, okay? And the goal of the Bridge programs is to bridge that gap between the initial skills that your students have and what they need to enter and succeed in one of those post-secondary education courses or a career path employment. Now, that being said, it's significantly different because if you think about the fact that they have limited academic or limited English skills, they're at the lower levels, intermediate to high beginning levels, and they are actually not prepared yet to go into what we call an ICAPS program. The ICAPS program is the one that actually offers the industry recognized credentials for the most part. They actually are they include the post-secondary education through CTE. They take it one step further than the bridges. So they're not the same, but a bridge needs to lead to somewhere. So it needs to lead to either employment or to further training or to post-secondary ICAPS programs. So that's what we need to keep in mind, is that bridge programs are like the precursor to an ICAPS program. They must include 3 core elements, and they are different from the ICAPS programs, so you need to pay close attention to this. They have to include contextualized instruction, they have to include career development, and they have to include transition services. So we're going to unpack those just a little bit. Contextualized instruction takes basic reading, math, and language skills and integrates that into industry occupation or an industry focus. So it needs to actually focus on one of the career pathways, or at least entertain the idea that there are multiple career pathways out there. So the industry occupation or knowledge is what is integrated into the reading, the math, the language. Sarah will go into that a little bit more in depth as we move on. But you've got to take the basic reading skills and the basic math skills or the basic language skills, and you've got to kind of look at them through the lens of healthcare or through the lens of IT or through the lens of manufacturing. So when we talk about bridge programs, we talk about broad career pathways and not specific industry credentials. So it's manufacturing as opposed to welding, as opposed to a welding certificate. It's healthcare as opposed to a CNA certificate. So it's a little bit more broad. The career development, it
Bevan,
can include,
Bevan,
yes.
before you go on, there's a question that relates exactly to what you're talking about, because you said that it is more broad, but can a bridge class have an industry recognized certificate attached to it, like an OSHA certificate in manufacturing, for instance?
Yes, it certainly can, and that's what it's intended to do. There, you can start to do the stackable certificates with those, and so they can actually start earning some things like an OSHA certificate, OSHA safety certificate, and in a manufacturing bridge program that would then lead into an icaps program, let's say, that might go into welding, because that OSHA certificate is in and of itself not something that makes them employable, but it actually adds to something that if they were to get a welding certificate in an icaps program, then that OSHA certificate would look really great on a resume for them to get a job. So it gives them a bump up, which is what bridges are intended to do. So did that answer the question? I hope. Career development includes career exploration and career planning within a career area. So if you have a healthcare bridge, you want to explore the various healthcare careers that are in the healthcare sector. There are countless careers, and as students are looking at, if they're in a healthcare bridge program, they're going to look at medical coders. They're going to look at CNAs. They're going to look at LPNs. They're going to look at even the IT industry in healthcare. So to see what kinds of jobs within that healthcare interest them for them moving forward into getting post-secondary credits to actually get a job into that field. And it depends on the level of your bridge program, on whether or not they're already, and also whether they're incumbent workers, because some people, if they have low enough skills, they may actually already have a job doing something, but you need to look at what they've got and look at the work with specific elements depending upon the level that you're doing. So if you're in a level 1 bridge or a pre-bridge, and we'll get to that in a minute, but if you're in a pre-bridge, then you have lower level students. The career exploration piece and the career planning piece are going to look a little differently than they do if they're in a level 2 bridge, getting ready to go right smack dab into an icaps program. The planning piece is significant in a bridge program for career development, because this is where students get their first look at what kinds of jobs are out there, what interests me, and then they can look and plan and say about how long and what kinds of skills am I going to need to do this, and where can I get those. And that's how you link that into the icaps programs, or link it into some training if you are a community-based organization or you're an ROE or a school district. You can link those into some training that may be within your area. You may not have a career and tech ed department because the college is there, or you could link them into the college for their icaps program. So you have options for that training piece that you want to link them into. You don't have to offer the training during a bridge, but you need to have them planning as to their future in their pathway, where this is going to lead them to. The transition services provide them with information and assistance that they need to actually move through adult education or occupational programs. Then there are things like academic advising and tutoring if they need some help, figuring out how to do study skills. Because if they go into an icaps program, they're going to be doing post-secondary work, and they need to know how to do study skills. They need to know how to, they may need some coaching from you to actually say, well, let's look and see what you've got here. Looking for referrals possibly to support services. And I know right now we're doing it in a virtual world, and so transportation and childcare aren't necessarily something that there is a need for at this moment in time. However, as they transition into the world of work and into ICAPS, they're going to need to be considering what kinds of things they would need for transportation or childcare, or in this situation, it could be as much as for current virtual world is what do they need in terms of digital technology. So do they need hotspots? Do they need computers? Don't go out and buy a bunch of computers for your students and then find out that they really don't want them. So that's what I talked to Georgia, and that's what they did. They went and bought a lot of um, uh, Chromebooks, and all the students said, well, we don't want these. We don't have hotspots. We can't link up to this because they don't purchase email. They don't have emails like we have emails. They don't purchase a provider. So that's something to take into consideration. So those are the three components of a bridge. So as we're going through this today, you need to think about the fact that all students in the states should be offering students at bridge levels. And these are the three things you need to do. So what can you do for contextualized instruction? What can you do for career development and transition services? And I think that Jane and Kathy are going to talk a little bit about this because you have to apply for the courses for these. And contextualized instruction is one of those things that needs to be applied as a bridge course, as part of your bridge program. So you'll have to apply for what you're going to do and say what you're going to use for your contextualized instruction. That could be one of the healthcare curriculum. We have statewide curriculum for bridges in healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, distribution, logistics, and we also have one that is on career pathways in general that is a little bit lower level. We are currently, one is in development for IT, which may be of interest to your students, especially in this virtual world. And so that's being developed right now, should be available later this fall. And I need you to understand that VOC only is not a bridge course. Okay, it's not a bridge program. Well, workforce development classes are not a bridge program. Workplace literacy class is not a bridge program. They could all serve as possibly the career development piece of this or the contextualized instruction course. So the career development course may be workplace literacy, it may be workforce development, it may be VOC only, but you have to understand that the contextualized instruction needs to be industry specific focus. So you have to limit it. So VOC only may be specific, but you'd have to apply that and would have to be contextualized to reading, math, or language. Workforce development classes and workplace literacy courses could serve as career development courses. You need to look at the content of what they are and see what they're addressing. Are they addressing career exploration and planning, or are they addressing integrating basic reading, writing, and language skills? Those are the differences between career development and contextualized instruction, but a bridge program must include all three of these. Okay. What we need to also look at that bridges not ICAPS. Okay. They are, however, they should lead to ICAPS programs or to industry training that is available within your local area. And sometimes we're now talking about some pre-apprenticeships or apprenticeships. So they could lead also into an apprenticeship. A bridge could lead into an apprenticeship. I spoke with a program director not too long ago who their college is doing a CAPIT apprenticeship to IT. And so they are working on developing a bridge IT. So it would be a pre-apprenticeship bridge that leads into that apprenticeship. So bridges, again, lead into training, which would be an apprenticeship, or it would lead into training, which might be someone at your local area that says, I'll take on somebody and I'll train them how to be an auto mechanic. And you work with those individual places within your area that say that they might be willing to take on some students for that. So then you would have a manufacturing bridge program that might lead into that for the training component of that. So, but you look at this, and ICAPS and bridge are not the same. These are the three components of an ICAPS program, okay? Adult education and literacy activities, workforce preparation activities, and then workforce training. So that's the difference. The adult education literacy activities, a bridge has contextualized instruction. That's basically a bridge is the adult education and literacy activity for this, okay? But you could you look at that and say the contextualized instruction falls under that. Workforce preparation activities under IETs, ICAPs, is in the world of bridges, like career development. They are not the same. The difference is number 3, workforce training. You do not provide workforce training in a bridge program necessarily. It is something that is specific to ICAPs where they provide the training to an IET. Bridges are not IETs. Bridges prepare students to be successful in workforce training. So as they're developing their career development and they're being taught contextually around a specific industry sector, and they're receiving transition services, then that will help them as they move into adult education literacy, workforce preparation activities, and workforce training. But it is not the same. Okay. Any questions, Sarah? Okay, let's look at the model that we use for when I told you about like a pre-bridge and a bridge. We have model A. This is the state model that we use. You'll notice that the IETs are over on the right-hand side. They're not the same. So you've got pre-IETs as model A pre-bridge. So it takes all that and it takes levels 4.0 to 5.9 in ABE. Those would also be the levels 3 and 4 in ESL. Model B is the bridge. So one is a pre-bridge. So we start this along a career pathway as they move forward. So they could start looking at some of these careers. You could take the career pathway bridge curricula that is for lower levels, and they could start looking at a variety of careers and in a pre-bridge program. And then when they get to a bridge program, you could say, okay, now we're going to focus on either manufacturing, IT, healthcare, or TDL. So that one is 6 to 8.9 levels, and level 5 and 6 typically for ESL. So when I say ESL, you can do the same thing because, as I said at the very beginning, it takes basic academic skills in reading, math, or language. So you've got all 3 of those pieces. So you can have an ESL bridge program, you can have an ESL pre-bridge program, you can have an ABE pre-bridge program, and an ABE bridge program. So, but they're not, as you'll notice, not IETs. So if we're looking at what you're doing and you're going to report what you're doing, if you're reporting on a bridge program, then it's a bridge program. If you're reporting on an ICAPS program, it's much more specific. Okay, Sarah, I'll let you talk about the contextualized curriculum and go into each of the pieces a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Bevan. So I want to pause just for a minute because Bevan's given you a ton of information, a lot to think about. So even if you've been through the bridge training before, or even if you've been running what you believe is a bridge program for a while, I want you just to kind of reflect on what all she shared, the 3 components of bridge compared to the 3 components of ICAPS, IETs. And then I want you to think about, what do I think of when I think of contextualized curriculum, contextualized instruction? What does that mean to me? Because contextualized curriculum and contextualized instruction can be very simple and very complex at the same time. So I really invite you, as we unpack contextualized curriculum, to think of it in a very broad-based way. And I'll share some ideas with you about that. And then also think about it in very specific, like what will it look like in a bridge program in my program. So it integrates basic academic skills with industry, occupation, and knowledge. That's the first 2 points under integrates. And that's usually what people come up with whenever I ask about contextualized curriculum. But it's more complex and really more relevant to all of our students because it also integrates relevant attitudes and behaviors. And this is where I invite you to think about contextualized instruction in a very broad way. Because whether you have 1 or 2 bridge programs or 6 bridge programs, hopefully you are encouraging your instructors, and not only encouraging, but providing them with resources that they contextualize instruction from day one, every level, every class. And one of the resources that's available in order to help teachers with this is Bevan and I did a webinar on Professional Development Day way back in January before the world turned upside down, called The Case for Contextualization. And it went through just that. How can you contextualize all instruction? And that doesn't mean that you've got to rewrite your curriculum, but it's a mindset that teachers can use, especially for that relevant attitudes and behaviors. If they're always relating, they being teachers, always relating whatever the topic is to some aspect of our students' lives. If we're always relating, maybe it's being on time to class, maybe it's working effectively in a group. Those are contextualization activities and contextualized attitudes that can help our students to really benefit. And just as for most of us, I think if we thought about our pathway that we've taken for employment and our career journeys, we didn't learn everything over one time. We didn't have somebody tell us one time what it means to be on time. We learned that time and time again. So an idea for contextualized instruction is also just integrating industry expectations. Like if work starts at 9, most employers expect you to be ready to go at 9 o'clock, not just breezing in the back door. So that would be a relevant attitude and behavior that we could start talking about with our students. The cool thing about contextualization is it gives us the format to talk about these kinds of things with students, because we can say, hey, I'm going to hold you to this standard because I want you to be successful. And in order to be successful in the world of work, which I know you want to be as well, because you've already told me that's one of your goals, then here's one of the pieces of that you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know how to work in groups. So again, I bet almost all the teachers in adult ed out there are already doing or having students work in groups. So the contextualization piece of this is very simple. We make sure that we tell students up front, hey, I'm going to put you in groups. And the reason I am going to put you in groups is because, number one, it helps learning to be more effective. Number two, that's a work skill. It's an expectation that's out there. So whenever you see on your screen that uses real life materials and situations, it's very, you might think of first, well, I'm going to have a stethoscope in a healthcare bridge, because that's where they might go later. Or I might have some type of a measuring device in manufacturing. So those kinds of things are there. But in addition to that real life materials, it's also helping them prepare for the expectations of the world of work. And so helping students understand where they're going to see these kinds of expectations and how they're going to use it. Also, some of your pictures there kind of show you that students being introduced to ways of work and materials, and that's going to help them to really be excited about their education. It's going to help them to learn at a deeper level. It's going to help them retain the information, and we want them to have all this information before they get to that workforce training piece that Bevan told you as part of ICAPS IET. And lastly, and very important for all of us, is it's going to keep them coming to class, because now I understand what the expectations are.
Sarah, Andrea has a question.
Yes.
I don't know if we could actually unmute her, but she had her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was looking at the other, yes. Let me see if I can find her. I think Andrea may have muted herself, because I tried to unmute. There you go.
Okay, I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't find the chat box, so I'm so sorry. So I will ask my question. So I think part of the problem sometimes with bridges is trying to decide which career to choose. So we do need to, in general, choose a big picture career like health careers or manufacturing, correct?
Yes.
Couldn't put in just explore all careers.
You can do that whenever someone had a question and said pre-bridge and bridge. The career pathway bridge curriculum is designed for just that, Andrea. It actually is, it has multiple career pathways in there, and it helps students at that level. I mean, the focus in adult ed now is not only on getting our students to help them increase their basic academic and language skills, but it's preparing them to enter a pathway. So a lot of them don't know what's out there. So yes, you could use the career pathway basic skills curriculum it's designed for bridges. So you could use that basic skills. Yeah, and that would be
pre-bridge. Call it a pre-bridge though.
well, you could call it a pre-bridge, or you could actually, it's designed to 6 to 7.9, I think. So, or 4 to 5 to 7. So it actually crosses over both of those, the levels that it's designed for. So you could use it for a pre-bridge, or you could actually use it for your bridge and do a career pathway bridge program. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Typically the bridge programs have one specific industry focus. So that's why that career pathway curriculum works best in a pre-bridge program, because then once they've been, I guess, surrounded by multiple career pathways, then that helps them to choose then which one is of interest to them, because they oftentimes, you know, those are higher functioning skills to look at things and actually discern which one best fits your needs, which one best suits your where you are in life. If you have a criminal background, you don't want to go into healthcare because it's not going to happen. You know, and it allows them an opportunity to delve into multiple career pathways, to be exposed to all of them, to see which one might be of interest. So that's why it makes more sense to put it at a pre-bridge. And then when you get to the bridge level, then you say, okay, we're offering a manufacturing bridge. How many people within the pre-bridge program were interested in careers in manufacturing? So we put them into the manufacturing bridge because it actually puts them along a career pathway. Then they take the manufacturing bridge program. You might have an OSHA certificate that is part of that, but it will not be, your bridge program is not an OSHA certificate. That is a piece of it that they earn while they're in that bridge program. Then they move on into an ICAPS program that may be welding, or maybe, you know, CNC operator. So those types of things, that's how you would do that. And that way you're out, you know, since the focus is on career pathways in adult ed now, we need to bring those students in at a level where they start getting exposure to the careers, then going into choosing, because you can't just bring somebody in and say, okay, what kind of thing do you want to do for your job? So you know, that's a way to introduce that to students, and get them into a pathway that is suited to them. Does that answer your question, Andrea?
Thank you. I just, one more question, maybe you'll address this later, but are all of these definitions delineated in DAISY? So we put in, sorry, I have the emergency broadcasting.
Yeah, we know. That's why we started late.
Just the whole DAISY, how to define these things in DAISY when we put the courses in?
Well, and I think Kathy and we'll address that when we get to the policy section at the end. Is that okay with you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's what we want to make sure we have clarification. And we've also had a request to remind everybody what the 3 components of ICAPS IETs are. So I went back to a slide that has the adult education and literacy activities, workforce prep, and workforce training. So in Bridge, we have the contextualized instruction, we have the career development, and we have transition services. So that's the difference that's there. And also somebody asked about where they could find the Career Pathway Bridge program curriculum. We are going to come to that in a little bit, and we're going to, the easy answer is on the ICCB website. There's also links on the Excellence website, Excellence in Adult Ed, your PD portal. So there's lots of ways you can get there, and we'll take you and show you that briefly in a little bit. And then we have one other question before we go on. How are the innovative grant awards connected with Bridge? Are they considered Bridge? They are considered Bridge, correct? So I don't know if we want to address that now or if we want to wait until we get to the Kathy and Jane portion.
I can address it however you want to do it.
Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, I assume you're talking about the Innovative Bridge Grant. Two different separate solitary grants. Now, the Bridge grant was given to you so you can develop these ICAPs and Bridge programs. That was the point of that grant. However, in order for you to be able to eventually use adult ed funds and actually use these Bridges and ICAPS programs that you're developing with adult ed grant and with the adult ed monies, you still are going to have to get it approved through the adult education process. The Bridge grant was just simply our giving you money, extra money, to actually work and develop the programs, because we know that is a costly process. So we added separate and additional money outside of adult education grants, because does that make sense?
Yes, and I want to say something to that as well. It's an Innovative Bridge and IET grant. And so we're talking about bridges here today. So that would be if you are developing a bridge program, meaning contextualized curriculum, career development and transition services, and career path, one specific industry kind of focus like manufacturing, a broad perspective, then that would be your bridge program that you're developing. If you're developing something for HVAC or CNC or for CNA, that would be an IET. So just so you know, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Jane and Bevan. And just to let you know, there are some follow-up questions that have come in, and we will address those. We'll turn those back to Jane and Kathy in a little bit when we get to the policy part. So let's go with the overview, the process a little bit before we get to that. So why should we do contextualized instruction? Why do we want bridge programs, besides the fact that ICCB requires them, and because WIOA requires them? Besides all of that, there's a lot of really good reasons why we want to have contextualized instruction. And that's why I'm putting my plug in today to make sure that we are teaching in a contextualized fashion beyond Bridge, beyond ICAPS. We should be teaching it everywhere, because it increases our potential for actually being able to apply what we're learning. We're going to transfer that to knowledge and skills. We're going to focus on building critical thinking skills rather than rote memorization. And being able to think critically, students are able to apply that knowledge. And research shows that knowledge learned only at the level of rote memory rarely transfers. So we need to make sure that our students get skills that they can actually use. My favorite all-time example of this is I had an adult ed teacher tell me that she was teaching geometry to her students, to a man. The student happened to be a man. She was tutoring him, and he was really having a hard time. And then she said, you know, let's take a break. Let's just take a break from learning and tell me what you did last weekend. He goes, oh, well, you know, I live out of town and I got some property and I installed an irrigation system around the perimeter of my property. And she laughed and she goes, you know what, you already know. You already know a lot of these terms that I'm using. Now let's apply this book learning to your real life experiences. So students are able to learn those individual concepts, but they're able to apply them in a way that works for them. Apply them to what they already know and apply them into what they need to know in order to be employed. And it fits into the big picture. As I said at the beginning, I want you to think of contextualization, both specifically, what are the requirements within Bridge, but then also think about them in very broad-based and how much richer conversation is, how much richer learning is whenever we contextualize. So we need to make sure that we're including technology. And I kind of have to laugh, y'all, because Bevan and I first worked on this PowerPoint probably 10 years ago, something like that. I mean, it's obviously been updated, but when we put technology on this slide 10 years ago, the need was there, but now it's there like 20-fold. We have to make sure that our students know. So now that we're teaching our students from a distance, we need to be contextualizing and saying, you know, you're going to need this for this place. You're going to need this in this job. You're going to need this in college. So helping them to understand the use of technology, the appropriate use of technology, and how it can be applied in other ways. Industry vocabulary. Again, vocabulary, any type of vocabulary the teaching is much richer and the retention is much stronger with multiple passes, with multiple applications, with being able to understand it at a much deeper level. That's why we want to make sure that we have, Bevan talked about a bridge should lead to somewhere. It should lead to post-secondary, it should lead to ICAPS, it should lead to employment. So they need to have that vocabulary, also the authentic materials and the relevant work situations. So we're thinking about writing, perhaps. So what would be appropriate writing for if I'm sending something, a text to a friend, as opposed to I'm writing an email or a report to my boss. So those would be kind of those relevant work situations. So think about, again, if we're teaching that in all the classes, if we're talking about that all the time, how much fuller and richer our students' education will be if we keep spiraling back around and around as opposed to a one-time pass. So that's the very quick overview of contextualized instruction. And okay, so I'm looking to see if there's other questions, but it looks like those are more policy questions. So let's move on and thinking about career development. And career development includes all of this, career awareness. So that would be like, what is out there? There are more jobs out there than just being a CNA. But oftentimes our students don't know that because they haven't had the exposure that they need. So that's why, again, I would strongly encourage that all classes talk about contextualization, all classes talk about awareness, so that they are thinking about that prior to ever getting to make their bridge and their ICAPS IET choice. Career exploration, exploring the types of careers in the area in which I'm interested, and then also preparing, which could be writing a resume, interviewing. It's pretty multifaceted. And then career prep could lead towards that career training, that workforce training component that's actually an ICAPS IET. So we want to make sure as we're providing career prep, we also integrate deeper career awareness and career exploration into the curriculum. Because once again, it's not a one-time pass. If we give our students multiple opportunities to be aware, that could look like having a guest speaker, and we could have them do that virtually. It might actually be easier to have a guest speaker virtually than have them actually come to a brick and mortar class, so that they can answer questions and they can say, yes, this is what I'm looking for. So thinking about doing that early on in our exploration. It also can mean expectations of the world of work. And I've already talked about this a little bit in contextualization, but attendance, work ethic, attitudes and behaviors. Here's the thing. My boss expects me to come to work more than 50% of the time. And you guys are chuckling because I'm pretty sure that's just a no-brainer. You already know that. But our adult education students need to be told that, because some of them think that maybe coming to class 50% of the time is pretty doggone good. Well, in the world of work, that'll get you fired pretty quickly. And I will put another plug in when you're looking for other types of resources for your teachers. There is a course on iLearn that's how to keep your job once you get it. And that was created from past experiences of having students who had the skills, the vocational skills that they needed, the career and technical skills, but they lacked those other skills, like making sure they didn't talk bad about the boss at the water cooler, and making sure that they showed up on time and those kinds of things. And so we need to teach those as well. So making sure that we understand different work styles, making sure that we understand the basic life skills, higher order thinking skills. Kathy put in the chat that time management is a metacognitive skill, that frontal lobe development in the brain. And so oftentimes our students are young and they haven't had that developed yet. And sometimes our students are older and they haven't had it developed either, because they haven't had it modeled. They haven't had it overtly and explicitly shown to them and taught to them. So time management includes planning skills, anticipation of what could go wrong, thinking about if this and this happens, then I'm going to need to allow some extra time up front. Soft skills, which I'll mention more about, and then access to resources and work-related information. So as I mentioned before about contextualizing all of our classes, is we can work these types of things into pretty much all of our classes, right? What you see on the screen right now, as long as our teachers know to do that and are encouraged and are given resources and training. And then also we can think about how do we put them in specifically into our bridge courses. Those employability skills, what we used to call soft skills, and we've kind of turned over to be essential employability skills for work and for life. So I'm going to be quiet for a second and let you read those to yourself. And now I'm going to ask you, and you can just answer it to yourself, but do you know for certain that your teachers are incorporating all of these explicitly into instruction? Because oftentimes, you know, we have very specific content knowledge, and it's like, yes, I have to check the box on this, this, and this. However, once again, what you see on the slides is actually what companies, what employers are telling us they're looking for. And I'm not saying that understanding fractions isn't important and being able to write a good paragraph isn't important. They are. But what you see on the slide right here is what employers tell us again and again and again that they're really looking for. It's what employers will let someone go over. So if we are not including these in our training for our students, then we are shortchanging them. They need to have this as well. We also need to make sure that there's good assessment that identifies more than just what they know, but what are their strengths? What are their interests? As Bevan mentioned before, do they have some underlying factor that keeps them from being able to advance, such as a criminal background record? So these are the kinds of things we need to talk about. We need to make sure that we assess what they're good at, how they want to spend their day. Right now, I always thought it'd be great to not have to work outside, but right now I'm thinking work outside people might actually have a benefit over the people who are working inside. So, but talking about how do you want to spend your day? And then matching students with appropriate settings, making sure that they understand the amount of training and what kind of preparation and what they need in order to get them employed. We want to also determine not only their academic skills, but their employability skills prior to and after instruction. We want to talk about that every day with students so that they understand what's going to get them. And so again, coming to class, doing your best, asking good questions, making sure that you know how to take a test. What are the types of tests, employment tests that are out there besides academic tests, and being able to meet the licensing or certification process. And once again, Bevan mentioned that before, and that's essential at this point because we don't want somebody going through a bunch of training and then not being able to have the career that they've chosen. So, all right, so I'm going to turn it over to Bevan and let her talk about transition. Whoops, sorry. There we go, transition services.
Before I go on, I wanted to address Rose Diaz's question. She wanted to know can you have a pre-bridge program, or do you still have to have a pre-bridge and a bridge program? I will answer that question by saying that if you have students that are at the level for a pre-bridge program, such as below the 6.0 level, that pre-bridge would need to lead to somewhere, just like a bridge needs to lead to somewhere. If the students start out in a pre-bridge program and they find something a career that interests them and they want to do more as their academic skills and their language improve to higher levels, then there needs to be an option for them to bridge out of that into something else. So if you did the career pathway basic skills curriculum in a pre-bridge and they found out that this is interesting to them, now mind you, it would need to still be within your LWIA plan. There needs to be jobs within your area for that. So you need to actually look at that and say, where will I bridge them to? If I put them in a pre-bridge and they complete that, where do we go from here? Where does their career pathway go from here? So I answer your question Rose, by saying, where do they go from your pre-bridge program if you don't have a bridge program for them to go into? So that's a consideration for you, but it would be a good place to start if you can't do both, to start a pre-bridge. But I think that in your planning process, you also then need to think about when they complete this and they improve their skills, where are they going to go next in their career pathway? And from a pre-bridge would be, to me, a specific sector bridge program, or into, moving on up depending upon their level of skills. So it's a consideration. So I hope that answers your question. The other thing, now we're going to start. Yes.
Bevan, before you go on, someone asked about a few good assessments, a suggestion, and the WorkNet website, and I can look that up for you, and put that in the chat in just a bit whenever Kathy and Jane are talking. But the WorkNet provides many free assessments for our students in careers. And so I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that, because those are all available to us. And then can you stack a pre-bridge class and a bridge class? And yes, you absolutely can. So that is, I mean, what you want to do is have multiple steps, because different students, in thinking of it, getting on and getting off at different places. It's, I know when we started talking about bridge training, before we even had ICAPS, we talked about the fact that students are going to come in at different levels. So we have to have entry ramps at different places, and they're going to have the amount of time and ability to integrate or to spend time, so they need to be able to get off at different places as well. So thinking about it as different on and off ramps.
Okay, and Lauren, I wanted to answer your question. Are we no longer using IET terminology? We use ICAPS. We had ICAPS in Illinois before WIOA came out with IETs. And so because of that, we use ICAPS/IETs, because we actually had our integrated programs around because of our participation in the Accelerating Opportunity Grant. We had our ICAPS around before WIOA ever reauthorized and included IETs in their terminology. So in this state, we kind of use ICAPS/IETs, and for bridges, we just usually call them bridge programs, because they're not IETs. They don't meet the WIOA definition of an IET like the ICAPS does. And so we don't use IETs necessarily. That's why whenever I showed you the earlier slide, it was a pre-IET. So it means pre going into ICAPS, pre going into this, a pre-IET, or it's a ready step. It's an on-ramp, as Sarah just said, to get into an ICAPS IET. So I hope that clarifies, but we use ICAPS/IET because of the fact that we had ICAPS around before WIOA put that into being. So let's move on to transition services, which is the third component of a bridge program. And it's a really important piece. A lot of programs have career navigators or career transition specialists, or someone who does this job. And it's really difficult to be an instructor and provide the transition support services, because these are things that need to be put in place before, because you're going to end up with students who, it's sort of like scaffolding. And that's why we use that picture there, because they provide students with the information and any kind of help that they need to move on from adult ed to post-secondary, or to the ICAPS programs, or to occupational programs, or even to the workforce. So if they need to figure out how they're going to purchase, or what kind of things they're going to need, where we refer them to, if they need help with food. We've actually had programs that have had food banks within their programs. It's to help them be successful. So it's anything and everything that they might possibly need. As they're moving into the workforce, they might need some assistance, some monetary assistance with purchasing equipment to be, to go into welding, or to go into whatever they're going into. They may need assistance with purchasing. Those are pretty pricey things that they have to have, those welding helmets, as they move forward. Not during your bridge program, but as they move forward. So we're always looking at where they're going on their pathway, and what services and what kinds of needs they may have along that way. I know that WIOA has funds, training dollars that can be used for assisting to purchase that kind of equipment for training. So that Career Navigator might link them to a WIOA training program that would help them pay for their support, the support service things that they need for that welding program. So we'll move on. They include guidance, counseling. Okay. They can include guidance and counseling. They can include career counseling. So this is what Sarah talked about earlier. You may need to talk to them about what are the things that are involved in this. I know that I've told this story multiple times, but I had students who were in a healthcare, had a program that had students that were in a healthcare bridge program. And halfway through, this one student said, why is everything we have to do in here talk about healthcare? Because I don't want to go into healthcare. They need to know. They need to look in their career exploration what kinds of things are involved in the career that they're looking at. If they're wanting to look at a CNA, they have to know that it's the sloppy end of the job. The LPNs and the RNs come in and give them a shot, but the CNAs get to clean up after people and give them baths and do those kinds of things. They need to know in a counseling situation what those careers entail. Personal counseling, like I said, if they need food, where there's a food bank. If they're in a violent situation that they need some violence prevention counseling. If for academic counseling, what are the courses that I'm going to need? And I think this is a lot of times can be a reality check for students, that these are the levels that I'm going to need to achieve before I can actually get a job in this. And say, okay, well, you're going to need to go here, here, and here. I had a student who wanted to go become a lawyer. And I said, well, first, maybe we need to look at some career options that are, because lawyers involve 4-year degree, and then you have to go on to law school for 2 to 3 years, and then you have to pass a big test. But let's look at what career options lead into the law field. And she became a paralegal. So that's academic counseling. So because that was achievable for her at that time. Later on, she did become an attorney, but that was her business paid for her to go ahead and go do that. Resources and referrals to reduce barriers, anything that they need. And this is transition services require a lot of planning, a lot of looking for where students might find these kinds of things. We have students that may be homeless. Given this situation with all the high unemployment rates that we're having right now, we may have some students who find themselves without a home. And so looking for have those resources available so that whenever those barriers come up, then the career navigator can assist them, or the transition specialist, whatever your program calls them. But just know that it should not be a teacher, because as you can see, there's a lot of things that go into transition services that don't necessarily include instruction. The teacher can oftentimes, they'll tell the teacher that they need things, and the teacher could possibly share that information or send that student to the career navigator for assistance in helping. We want them to be successful. We want them to stay their course. We want them to stay along their career pathway, and they may have some barriers. Some of them may not, but some of them may. And we put these transition services in place rather than deal crisis management. Once the crisis comes, we go, oh, what are we going to do for this person? Well, we have some of these things already in place prior to these situations arising. So it's anticipatory of what kind of needs our students may have. And I think you all are aware of some of the needs that your students have, but as they progress in a career field, what are some of the needs that they might have with that? So those are all part of the transition services component of a bridge program. So Sarah, I'll let you talk about the bridge curricula, because I know people were asking about it earlier.
Yes, thanks, Bevan. So just another resource that we have for you is 4 ICCB approved contextualized curricula. There's one in healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, distribution, logistics, and career pathways. And then you can see on your slide, coming soon is the information technology. It's being created at this point and should be out later this fall. I will take you, I know you guys want to get to the policy part, but let me just show this to you because there was a lot of questions around this. This is the Career Pathways Basic Skills Curriculum. So this was created, this is the fourth of the four that have currently been completed. And the first three were chosen because of the industry need in Illinois. This one was chosen because of feedback from the field that said, hey, we need a curriculum that addresses a little bit lower level students. We need a curriculum for just what Andrea said before, is sometimes students don't know what they want. And I put up career awareness and how important it is to think about, how do I want to spend my day? So this is set up in largely the same way, so they're all in this, that there's a component for career awareness. There's one for literature and arts. There's one for math, for science, for social studies. So you can see that they are by different content areas. They're all written up with the curriculum and then supporting activities and resources. And I will tell you also, just FYI, for those curricula that are older and they've been around for a long time, i.e. the manufacturing, the TDL, and the healthcare, we've had a lot of additions over the years where adult ed teachers that have been using this said, hey, yeah, and I use it in this way, and here's some more resources for you. So hopefully that is helpful as you think about how you want to use this with your teachers. I encourage you to take a look at this. They are massive. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, everything that's here, there's tons of resources. So again, if you need individual help in your program, Bevan and I are very happy to help you with that. If there's something that we can help you find, let us know. We are happy to do that as well. I am going to put up some additional resources whenever Jane and Kathy are talking about that WorkNet website of some assessments that are free, that are available to you. And then hopefully you all know where iLearn is. If not, I can put that in as well. There's lots of resources for your teachers there as well. Go ahead, Bevan. Do you want to take this back?
Okay. So what we want to do here is think about, is what you have a bridge program. Do you serve students 6 to 8.9 or ESL levels 3 to 4 or 5 to 6? Do you use contextualized curriculum? Do you provide career development integrated into your curriculum? Do you provide transition services for your students? Is it taught by an adult ed instructor and serving adult ed students? Does it provide for students to bridge to post-secondary, ICAPS, or employment? Those are the things that you need to consider if you have a bridge program. Someone asked if a support class is part of an ICAPS program. Can you mark the class a bridge class, not a bridge program, but a bridge class? And that would be a policy question. And the last piece of this is it approved as a bridge course by the ICCB? And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kathy and let you possibly address maybe that support class part question right there. With if a support class is part of an ICAPS, can you mark the class as a bridge class, not a bridge program, but a bridge class? The support, so I'm going to let you deal with that, Kathy. You need to unmute yourself, Kathy.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So very high level, while I am kind of sharing with field what we're trying to do at the ICCB, can you kind of look at the policy questions so we can kind of answer some of those as they come in? I wanted to take a minute to share with everybody why we're doing this, this big push towards bridge. We've always had this, but in our last year's data, what we see is that only 38 programs have identified bridge courses in DAISY. And what that's telling me is that you guys are doing the work, you guys have the bridge courses, you guys are working in this direction, but we're not adequately capturing it in DAISY. What I'd asked our regional support team to do at the beginning of this month was to reach out to all of our programs and ask, okay, this is what we know, we think that you're working towards, but we're not seeing that. So can we kind of work towards a resolution so we can adequately track what you're doing? One of the key things to think about is having a bridge program is a part and a requirement on your adult education grant. So when we're not seeing that, it is a compliance issue, and it's a pretty significant one as far as, you know, what we're looking towards. But I recognize that you're doing the work. We recognize that you're putting this together. So we know there's a disconnect between what is being recorded and what is actually happening. This is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to actually bridge these pieces and connect the dots. In that process, we've discovered a few things about some of our record-keeping processes and our approval processes that we're working on updating so that we are all in alignment and working in step. So with that being part of where we're at, to specifically address the question you asked, if I understand the question, you have a support class that is a part of your icaps program. If I'm understanding that question, then that support class, which is a part of the icaps, would go as an icaps IET course, not necessarily a bridge course. Now, I also, as a team, we want to give you as much flexibility as possible to serve your students. So if you have a rationale for why that needs to be considered part of your bridge program, talk to Jane, talk to your regional support. We'll work with you to figure this out. Okay, that's the one thing I want you to take away with today, is that we're here to help you. All of us are here to support you. That's our role, is to support you in your delivery. So we can kind of keep addressing the questions as you go through. So Jane and I are going to answer your questions as they come in and help you get this pulled together. So go ahead, Bevan, with the questions, and then Jane and I will take turns answering them.
Okay, one of the questions, a couple of the questions deal with the ICAPS or the IET bridge grants.
Okay.
Does it mean, do they need to submit an ICAPS application for the career field covered by that innovative bridge grant? And then the other question that goes with that are this year's IET bridge grant classes to be entered into DAISY. So those are both with that grant.
Okay. The thing. Go ahead, Kath. You want to go first? Because
I will go first, and then
Okay.
I'll let Jane kind of go specific in the policy. The IET grants, Innovative Bridge and Technology, those do not. So let me talk about the Innovative Bridge first. That money is not coming out of adult education money, so that doesn't necessarily get to count towards your bridge program and your bridge students unless you're somehow braiding that funding with adult education money, and then we can count it. Your the IET money, and Jane, correct me, but that comes from adult ed, and that comes out of adult ed dollars. So those courses could count towards your bridge or your icaps because they come out of adult ed money. Now, what we would do is work with you, because if you have submitted a proposal and we have funded that proposal, then we obviously recognize that as an icaps or a bridge program. But we might have a clarifying question or two to make sure that all of the pieces are there. Because what's required for the IET grants doesn't necessarily have the team teaching and the shared learning objectives that you would have in a true icaps program. So we might have some clarifying questions to ask, and then it will be approved. So it's kind of like a multiple step process. Jane, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, both of those, they're not, you would need to get all of that approved through the regular channels for adult ed, because I don't see anything when it comes to that IET grant. That, I mean, it's not handled by the same people. The classes are not in DAISY. So if you're going to use adult ed grant funds and put things in DAISY and label them as Bridge or icaps or use them to braid funding, we need to know about it through the regular adult ed channels. You would need to do an icaps proposal. You would need to enter things into DAISY as bridge courses. Just because you have used another grant to develop something does not mean it doesn't have to be approved for the adult ed grant. It just makes the approval process go so much easier since you've already done half the work, but it still has to be approved for our adult ed usage. Because like I said, the IET grant, I don't know anything about that particular grant or what you're doing with it. So, like I said, I deal with adult ed and I deal with the bridge grants. And even the bridge grants that I do know about, that I do know that someone's working on developing a bridge program or an icaps program, that would still need to be approved via the regular channels for adult ed approval of icaps and bridge programming.
Okay. The next question is, can adult education performance funds pay the adult ed support instructors to audit the CTE classes in icaps or IETs? I know we're talking about bridges here, but I'm getting some icaps and IET questions.
That's fine. We're here to help programs, so we'll field the questions. But I am going to turn that one over to Jane as far as funding policy and how those courses work with as far as the performance money.
No, you cannot use to pay an instructor to audit a class. No, I believe that's not an allowable cost for anything at any, it would for any point or any purpose. And like I said, unless that instructor is actually part of teaching it, or a team teacher in it, or a secondary teacher in it, that instructor couldn't be paid just to audit the course. No.
Okay, Kathy.
That covers, that would cover any instance for any other occasion too.
Kathy, Cindy Law wants to know, how were the innovative grant awards connected with Bridge? They are considered Bridge, correct?
Well, okay, so they are, okay, so what's happening is they're coming out of different funding sources, and that's where some of the difficulties coming from. Yes, that money is provided to a program so you can develop and scale and have access to more resources, but it's not coming out of adult ed money. So it's coming from ICCB, just not out of our adult ed state basic, federal basic money. So we have to have a different funding source, and when we use different funding sources, there are different rules that guide how those are used. So when you're doing this, if you have a bridge program or an IET grant and you'd like to count that towards your adult ed hours, let's schedule a phone call with you. Let's work through it together, and so that you can count it. We're here to help you. That's our entire goal, is to be here to support you. So if you have those questions, schedule a call. We'll work through it. You can braid some of that money, and then we can use it. Okay.
Yeah. To use adult ed funding for any of those courses, anytime you use adult ed funding, at least 51% of that class must be paid for with adult ed funds. So yeah, there are some that have braided funding, and there are some who have chosen not to braid funding and just use their other grant funds, and therefore they've not even put any of it in DAISY because it's not being used with adult ed monies. But there are some who have chosen to braid some of that and pay, if they wanted to use adult ed, at least 51% of that class must be paid for with the adult ed grant.
Okay, I have another question here, and I have a comment about it, but you guys can answer the policy part of it. If a support class is part of an icaps program, what can we mark that class as a bridge class, not a bridge program, but a bridge class? And here my comment to that before you guys address policy with that is that a support class in an ICAPS program is specifically designed to support the instruction that is happening in the CTE classroom as part of that ICAPS. And so therefore it is addressing a specific job because they're getting a certificate in that. A bridge class is more broad, and it would be like manufacturing and not necessarily the coursework that is covered in a support class. Those students are participating in that ICAPS program, and therefore they should be at a different level as part of an ICAPS program than they are in a bridge class. So I would say that would not count as a bridge class, but I'll turn it over to the policy people.
I agree with
And
you
I'm gonna take
100%.
that one real quick. So what we're getting into here are some very specifics, because I believe that with that question, you're tying it to a very specific idea that you have at your program. I would support everything that Bevan said on the direction and the direction we would go with whether we consider that a bridge or an ICAP support class. But what I want to say is, when you get to this point and you're trying to build these classes and trying to figure out these pieces and how they work together, you're not going to need to do this alone. Again, one of the biggest mistakes that I am seeing across the state is that people are trying their best to do everything that they need to do, and we've had a lot thrown at us in the last year, and we're trying to get it done, and we're forgetting that we have all of these resources available. So when you have that plan and you have that specific question of how this is going to work together, you can reach out to Bevan and Sarah and schedule an appointment with them and say, this is what we're thinking. How does this flow together? Where do we put these pieces? Then you can reach out to Jane, your regional support, and say, okay, I'm ready to move forward. What do you see? What do I need to do? And we will help you with that. Don't hesitate to reach out in the planning stage so that we can help you. So to answer the question quickly, which I seem never to be able to do, but to answer that quickly, I would agree with what Bevan just said. That is more of an ICAP support with a very specific goal to support the ICAPS learning, very contextualized. But if you're thinking in a different way, or you see this fitting in a different way, when those specific questions come out, let's talk about it and figure out where it needs to fit and how it fits together. Okay?
Okay.
And I agree with Bevan 100%. Like I said, it's just two different things.
Okay. If course works, I think maybe it's if a course. Okay. If a course works with students at 11.0 GLE and qualifies as ASE, can it still be considered a bridge because it doesn't earn credit and is still considered secondary? Student can sit for CNA tests, but the course does not guarantee a certificate. You want my opinion on that?
I'm just not a big on that one.
Okay. Sitting for that sounds like a test prep course, because we've had this come up before where the people were using and number one at 11.0 grade level is bridges are designed for 6 to 8.9, and and so they're not designed for ASCs, but I would not call that a bridge course because the bridge course actually would be in healthcare and not preparing to take a CNA test. If you cover some of the information within that course, within the contextualized curriculum about healthcare, then you're dealing with the basic academic skills in a bridge program. And so at 11.0, that individual does not really need basic academic skills. That would be part of a bridge program, and just planning to sit for a test is not an actual bridge course, not training them to sit for a test. So that's my comment about that.
So when you have that course idea, it sounds like you could have the beginnings of an actual IET. There might be some more pieces to that you can build into it to make it a full IET program, because you're doing the support course with the student, you're getting them ready, they're taking a CNA class at the same time. So when we see questions like that, we can help kind of move you in a direction, support you to where it develops what you need it to look like in order to fit all of the IET or icaps bridge requirements that we have.
Okay. And one person asked if they do an information technology bridge, can they wait till the curricula is introduced this fall to guide them? Yes, most certainly. We'll have it posted, and we'll make a note of that, Laura, and we'll send you a notice whenever it actually becomes available. Okay, just so you know.
And certainly, you are not required to have a bridge class and a bridge program up and running in August. Okay, we fully recognize the struggles that programs are having right now. This seems very unfair, I think, sometimes for us to say, oh, by the way, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've never done this before. You're going to be totally remote learning. And oh, by the way, let's get our head wrapped around all these bridge programs. And I truly understand what that feels like from an administrative side of it. We're just looking at the big picture throughout this fiscal year. Having these conversations early in the year allow you to have the support teams available to you so you can plan to implement them at a time that fits your program and your students' needs. Keep in mind, you are required not only to have a bridge program on the books, so to speak, but you're required to implement a bridge program this fiscal year. But yes, you can certainly say, wait, we're going to wait for the IT bridge to come out in fall, and then we're going to put our processes in place, and we'll administer it or deliver it in January, February. That is certainly within the realm of possibilities, okay? So please know that we're talking about what your year needs to look like. These are not expectations by August 15th, you have to have something in bridge.
Well, and to add to that, the Transitions Academy is going to be virtual this year, and we're going to run it in November, the 5th and 6th of November. So there will be some more additional information for bridges in the Transitions Academy. So if you so choose to, as you're working on like developing a bridge, if you need some additional help, if you can call Sarah and I, or you can also attend the Transitions Academy, and there'll be some bridge selections for you to choose from to participate in. We're also planning to have a learning community for bridges that will be offered after the forum in October. So that would be some place where you all could get into and talk with each other for issues that may be arising, because there's a lot to planning a bridge program. And like Kathy just said, you have to kind of get some partners into place. You have to get all of your information. The curriculum is just one choice. And so there's a lot more pieces that go into developing a bridge program. And like I said, the Transitions Academy will be covering some of those pieces. So if that's helpful to you, then by all means, November 5th and 6th on your calendar. Okay. Another question, just so we can keep track of all of our department students in the same system, may we enter our Capit Bridge or Innovative Bridges students in DAISY, but mark the funding as non-adult ed grant funding source?
That is complicated because remember that the funding source in DAISY 4910, that is being used exclusively for carryover funds. So you have very limited, keep in mind in DAISY there's very limited places for you to put those extra funding sources. Also, too, if the students in those classes are already in adult ed, a lot of them may already be in DAISY because a lot of the students do go back and forth. They are the same students. But I think that would be very difficult. I know it's preferential so you can keep track of stuff, but DAISY has been designed basically for adult ed students. And if you keep trying to add different types of students into that system, it has the potential to blow up, especially now that we are implementing version 2. I understand your desire to do it, but I think that just might be problematic, especially given the fact that we are designating different one of those open funding spots for carryover money exclusively.
And what I did hear in that question is your desire as a program to be able to put all of your students in a central location and be able to track them through their progress. And as Jane mentioned, currently with the existing current structure we have, that will get complicated. But I am going to make note of this and reach out to our DAISY team and see what that could entail, if it's possible to make a quick adaptation. And I'm not going to promise anything, but I am going to tell you we will look at that so we can start seeing what your needs are. And what I just heard was a need recommended in the field. So we will look at that, and I will see what we can do, and we will provide you updates if we can do this or not.
Okay, and Glenda, Glenda made a comment that some ASC students need the career development and transition services offered in the Bridge class, and I would agree with you, Glenda. The level that they're at, I mean, you could actually do a career development course, and in my viewpoint, as part of your Bridge program. And I don't think Kathy or Jane could correct me. I don't think that there would be anything wrong with putting some additional students that might be interested in receiving some of those services in there. Even if they weren't part of the Bridge class, they could actually be part of that career development course.
What I hear Bevan saying is you have a Bridge program with multiple classes within that Bridge program, and one of those classes might be career development, and some students in that class are also not necessarily Bridge students. They are adult education students, and yes, I think that is a fine answer for that. Certainly with our smaller class sizes, we don't want to force you into running a class for 5 students and run another class of the exact same type for another 5 students. That doesn't bode well for any program or for any kind of development. So yes, that would be reasonable to put them in classes that serve the students' needs.
I would just, before you do anything like that, just call with specifics, you know what I mean, just so we can nail it down so you don't accidentally do something that would not be correct. So like I said, before you would do that, just give me a buzz beforehand.
Okay, and it looks like that's all the questions I see. Sarah, do you see any others?
Yeah, there's a couple at the end here. Bridge class versus Bridge program. Can you please elaborate?
Okay. Your Bridge program is broader. It's like I have a Bridge program in the healthcare career cluster. Within my Bridge program, I have a course on contextualized reading for healthcare. I have a workplace literacy course that's a part of that, what that looks like, workplace in healthcare. I have possibly a contextualized math class that has to deal with math in healthcare. So you're starting to put all these courses together under that overarching program in this career cluster, and then you're going to funnel that student more into medical terminology as an IET, CNA as an IET, or something to get to a credential. That's in a Bridge class is part of that Bridge program. Okay, so to be honest, and I'll take ownership of this mistake. At the beginning of this process, where we were trying to determine what was happening in the field and why I only have 4% of our entire adult ed population in any kind of a Bridge class, it's because even at our ICCB level, we had a discrepancy of what we were calling Bridge program and Bridge classes, and we are now trying to connect those dots so that you have all of the support that you need, and all these classes that go under your Bridge program are correctly categorized so you get the credit for that.
All right, and then to clarify, Kathy,
last point, I forgot to mention 2 things, Sarah, I apologize. As you're looking in your Bridge program, please recognize the ICCB approved curriculum that Bevan's teams have developed are already approved, and you can use those as a part of your Bridge program and use those. And if you're looking at how to use those, again, schedule an appointment with Bevan and Sarah, and they will work you through that. We can all hop on a phone call together if you need all of us there. And also, just to put a plug out to the forum, conference, which is coming up. And for those who are administrators on this call, we are doing one single administrators meeting this year, as opposed to doing them at each of the regional conferences. So September 23rd will be the administrators meeting, and we're going to do that virtually. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. The registration went out this morning. And there are no fees at the program level for these conferences. Our PDN has worked really hard at keeping this at no cost to you guys, while still trying to come up with some engaging, fun kind of events.
Okay,
I
thanks,
see.
Kathy. And so just to add,
Lindsay Kelly has her hand up and it's been raised for an hour. I'm sorry, Lindsay. Can you unmute Lindsay, Sarah?
yes, I can.
I didn't see her hand. So.
Okay, Lindsay, I think you need to unmute yourself as well. And the hand's down now. So if you want to speak, please let us know, because we want to make sure we get all the questions answered. But while we're trying to figure that out, let me just, Jane and Kathy, so what exactly needs to be submitted for the Bridge and ICAPS to be approved by ICCB? For Bridge, is it just the new course submission form and addendum 11D?
So years ago, there used to be a formal approval process for a Bridge program, where under that program, you would list all of the courses that you associated with that program. Somewhere along the lines, that process changed, and I will tell you, so when you're asking me what we exactly need to do, we're working on getting that out to you in a simple process. What I am thinking at this time is an email to Jane and myself saying, this is my Bridge program. These are all the courses that we count as part of the Bridge program. And those courses would then be approved through CurricuNet. If they're already approved, we simply need the course number. And at that point, I think we're going to move on and say approved, because I do not want to, in the chaos that we're having right now, make life more complicated for everybody here.
And I vote for easy. I want things to be as easy as possible.
You know, what I hear from both of you over and over is communication. So I think that's key in making sure, you know, the early and often communication. And so speaking of that, one more question. Our program is starting workplace skills enhancement class through SOS Adult Ed Literacy Grant. Should I enter the students on DAISY under non-ICCB grant class?
I am reticent to do that. If they are not, if you're using DAISY for purposes for which it was not intended. It was only intended to record adult ed students. And if they are not being funded, if they are not adult ed students, then you're starting to clutter up that system, and this is where things get mistaken. You're going to accidentally start charging things off where they ought not to be charged off. I am reticent to say, yes, go ahead and use DAISY for non-adult ed students. That just, I think, is a problem waiting to blow up.
Okay. There's a question here, actually a two-part question. Their program is starting workplace skills enhancement class through SOS Adult Ed Literacy Grant.
That's the one we just did, Bevan.
Okay, sorry. So then they said, so would career development course be a pre-bridge course? No, it would not. A career development course is actually one part of a bridge course. So the pre-bridge course would be an entire curriculum by itself. The career development would be your career development piece of the components, the 3 components of a bridge course. So you would need the curriculum that's contextualized, and then you would need the career development course, which would be the 2nd component, and then the transition services. So I hope that answers your question, Kang Hee.
Just one more thing I'd like to bring up. Communication. At this point, with everybody still working from home or half in the office, half at home, working out of cars, you know, I feel homeless sometimes. It's best just to email. If you give me an email, then I can contact you and tell you what number to reach me at if you need to phone me. So it's still, I think the best way to reach any of us would be an initial email, and then we'll make the contact.
Okay, and then related to that is we've had a request that the simplified process Kathy and Jane just mentioned for ICAPS or bridge approval. Could you repeat that so that everybody hears it again?
Okay, so right now, I will accept an email that that we will have sent to Jane and myself that says the bridge program, here is the career cluster we are serving. These are the courses that go under that bridge course, that bridge program, because these courses are the contextualized courses. If you already have them in CurricuNet, just tell us what course numbers they are. If you don't have them and you're working on approving them, they will have to go through CurricuNet.
Or the other approval process. Remember, community-based organizations don't use CurricuNet.
Okay, or the other, okay, so however you get those approved, the courses get approved. And then the final thing on that quick email is to identify the transition service and say, this is how we're going to do it. Right now, a simple email outlining your program is all I care about. It allows us to support you, it allows us to help you, and it allows me at the end of the year when I have to report out to the feds what we did with all of the expectations, and I'm reporting out 4%, I have to have a way to justify that. And I know the work is being done. Quite simple, an email, career cluster, courses, how you're gonna get the transitions handled, and we're good.
Kathy, like I said, that was a 2-part question. This is just for bridge. We still need the regular, we're not talking ICAPS. We're talking bridge. We're not talking ICAPS. ICAPS is a much more involved process. That has not changed. That was never in question. This right now is referring to bridge programming.
Okay, and then Bevan, could you clarify about bridge level and ASE students? Because we had a question about when you have an ASE student who's interested in a career cluster for which we have a bridge class, but they're a higher level student. Can you just clarify what you said earlier about bridges? And
they can put the student in. I just responded to the person's question, but they can put the student into the bridge. However, most of the curriculum in the bridge program should be addressing 6 to 8.9. So that ASC student, being at a higher level, that information, I mean, they'll gather the information that is being taught in the bridge class, but that student, that information is going to be at a level that is probably, you know, lower than what they are for reading and stuff. So Kathy, they can go ahead and put them into that. Yes.
Yes, that's what we said earlier, but as Jane mentioned, to work with us in that process so that we ensure that the funding is correct and all the pieces are in place. So just that's a documentation process that we'll work with the programs on. So yes, but just talk to us so that we can get it counted correctly.
For that ASE student?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. Sarah, do you?
It's just the one last was just a clarification. Will this process for bridge approval be reiterated by email? Just clarifying.
Yes.
All right.
I will do that by next week. Now, I'm in the last time where I said I was going to summarize an email. What I did or when I was going to summarize the webinar, what I did was I put it in the provider manual and released the provider manual. That led to some confusion from people because they were looking for a different kind of an email from me. So what I will tell you is, yes, this will get summarized, but it will probably not get summarized until at least next week, and I will make it a more of a clear email, okay?
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
You want to wrap us up, Sarah?
Yeah, so thank you everybody for spending time with us this morning. We hope that it's been very helpful. We look forward to working with you to make sure that we have many and thorough bridge programs available for our students in Illinois. And this will be recorded and available if you want to watch this again. Otherwise, thank you everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.